Hello. Thank you, TAPMI. Thank you for having me here. Today, I'm going to speak about imaginative labor. And I want to begin my story with this postcard. This girl, who is of 2 years old, is actually here in the audience today, but I won't go there today. But this postcard was sent by a migrant laborer on the occasion of his daughter's second birthday. This was early 90s. This postcard has two parts. One is a photograph. That photograph was actually taken by his wife of their child and sent to the Gulf. And now it has come back from the Gulf as a postcard. And then below, you have 7 languages. You have Urdu, Filipino, French, Malayalam, Arabic, English, and Hindi. Thanks to Google, we know these languages. Today, we can identify them. But for this migrant family about whom I'm speaking, they would have known, of course, they can read Malayalam. Arabic would be known to them because of liturgical purposes. And they would know the most familiar English phrases. But beyond that, nothing. This photograph, this postcard, was in fact an eye-opener for me. Why is it? It's because think about how we speak about migration. Think about all the works there are, most of the works there are on migration. They speak about GDP, they speak about remittance, they speak about caste, they speak about gender, they speak about all sociological factors. There are, of course, successful migrants, there are failed migrants, but they don't speak about the experience of migration. What does it feel for the individual migrant to be migrating? And this postcard actually tells us that migration is actually about getting lost. About getting lost and finding yourself in a landscape of unknown languages, strange occupations, trapped in jobs that are unfamiliar, companioned by learning, nurtured by solidarity. That is migration. Migration is to be lost in a landscape where even though you do not understand the language, you still have to interpret what is that job that was asked of you. There you cannot say, I was just doing my job, because there you are actually actively interpreting your job. That is what migration means. Migration means that even though you do not know the language, these sounds of these strange languages, their curious twists, their suspenseful pauses, their happy conjoinings, their inflections, they play in the background of your sleep, even though you do not understand what they say. And that is migration. Migration is to be in a foreign land with body as your asset, knowing the potentials of your body, knowing the potentials in which you can twist your body so that you can live lives that you haven't yet lived. And that is where I came into migrant photographs. So our first task here is to acknowledge that these migrant photographs exist and to discover what it has to tell us. In fact, think about how photographs used to be in the 70s, in the 60s, in the milieu that I'm speaking about in Kerala. They used to be high up there on the walls of the elders who were to be revered. But what did these cameras do? These cameras were actually a novelty in the 1970s. In the late 1970s, these cheap cameras flooded the markets of the Gulf. And even those workers who were low in the rungs of pay hierarchy, they could afford these cameras. And then they could send photographs in these bulky albums. Those photographs which used to be high up there on the wall of revered elders now became the site for testing your bodily abilities, your acting skills, and now they were placed in a photo album. It's no more revered, it is a place of creativity. It is not something that you look respectfully. It is something that you look with what you can do onto it. You were the authors of this new medium. And then once we have discovered, once we have acknowledged the presence of hundreds of thousands of photographs taken by migrant laborers, blue-collar migrant laborers in the Gulf, and I have collected a few hundreds of them, then you start to indulge them. Then you see what are they. And I would tell you that they were not documents of everyday lives. They were not. This is what we think of photographs. We think of photographs as if they are documents of realistic life. No. These photographs, they don't tell you about the soil. They don't tell you about the toil. They don't tell you about the grime and the stickiness of the jobs that these migrants were doing in the Gulf. No. They actually draw their idioms from cinema. They act out these migrants in their photographs. Instead of depicting life realistically, they actually showed us what life can be. Many decades before the Gulf became a tourist destination, these migrants showed us the Gulf as if it was some urban location in an action cinema. They showed us the future that was yet to happen, and this is imaginative labor. Because these migrants who are construction workers, who are office boys, who are drivers, who are cooks, they could imagine the Gulf, what it would become decades later, as a place of adventure, as a place of consumption, as a place of freedom. This was a life that they hadn't yet lived. But this is a life that they could imagine. And they were constructing the Gulf, even in their leisure. This was the imaginative labor that the blue-collared workers, that the migrant laborers put into the Gulf. They were not just building buildings according to someone's plan. They were actively constructing a Gulf that would become, and that was not there in the early 80s. And then lastly, I want to take this moment to say that this is the time that we can reclaim these photographs, these archives. Do you know where these photographs are today? These photographs were put in some old boxes. They were put in some corners in the loft of the houses with no one to look at them, with no one to take them out. As a researcher, I had to go into many of these houses and discover corners where these photographs were kept. Everyone had forgotten about these photographs. And then the intense humidity of this region, it leaks the slow wrath of time onto them. Colors run from these photographs. They go stale. No one looks at them. They are like relics with no one to even care for. These are stale photographs. And in these stale photographs, what we see is a life that was imagined as would come. Well, our imagination fell short of the reality because reality was even better than how these people imagined it to be. But these were the archives of the future once upon a time, the archives of the future. And now is the time, considering that these were pioneers who rebuilt not just their families, not just their regions, but entire nation, entire population. This is the time to reclaim the future as it was seen by these pioneers. And this is the time that we can reclaim these photographs and these archives as our record of the future as it was imagined once upon a time. Thank you.